Now I'm going to go ahead and present our next panel, the challenge ahead. So please, if the panelists can come into the stage. I'm going to introduce the moderator, Paul Newnham from Beans' How. So welcome, Paul.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Eve. I have learnt things, and I've heard Eve speak a few times, so I was so excited to learn more today, and my brain's firing already. And so if you haven't read Eve's book, I am lucky enough to have read it, and I definitely encourage you to grab a copy. I don't think there'll probably be enough for everyone, but please try and grab a copy. The title of our session today is The Challenge Ahead, Change Makers and the Pathway They Create to Increase Consumption. And we've got a really exciting panel here today, and we're going to get them to introduce themselves in a minute. And these are change makers who are helping drive forward some of the thinking, some of the learning around how we drive this forward. So Alison Greenhill-Ball from Conscious Impact and also Beans' How Theory of Change, welcome. We have Kathy Powers, who is from Culinary Nutrition Associates, welcome. And Javier Bertereche, I've been practicing your surname and I almost got it, from Bridge to Food. And so we're gonna dive in a minute into this conversation. And before we get into the heart of the conversation and hopefully time for you to also ask us some questions, we want to just take a moment to quickly just introduce each of ourselves a little bit further so that you know why we're here on stage and what we're talking about. And so I'm going to start and then I'm going to hand over and we'll just go through reasonably quickly. So I'm excited to be here as the Chief Beans Officer for Beans' How. And we talked a bit about Beans' How last year in Colombia, and so it was great that Rebecca's invited us back and the team from US Dry Beans and really bringing this together and elevating. I mean, I was amazed out at the outside to see all of the different bean products and just seeing the energy, and I feel it's really building, and so it's great to be here at the moment. So Beans' How is an ambitious campaign to double global bean consumption by 2028. So we're 1 year into it. And the idea is to make beans visible, to talk about the importance of beans as a simple, affordable solution to some of our global financial, health, and climate challenges. And I think at the moment, with everything that's going on, we need solutions to those challenges in different ways. So we really are looking at how we make beans visible and desirable and necessary. And it's about looking at long-term behavior change. So we've developed a transdisciplinary approach which brings together a kind of multi-pronged group of actors that are kind of looking across retail, restaurants, catering, public institutions, including schools and hospitals, and other government-funded institutions. And we're trying to also bring together the stakeholders to work together. Often what I've found in systems change is that you find people are working in parallel with one another. And what we need to do is find how we can work together. So we've got a number of members to achieve these goals. There's a coalition which has over 90 plus organizations already from around the world, including US Dry Beans and many others that are here today. We have a Bean Science and Innovation Council, of which a number of the members are here as well. Alison is one of the members, Jean-Claude here, Eve, who just spoke to you. So it's a very interdisciplinary group of people from around the world. And then a bean board, and we have Bush's Beans as a part of the bean board, and it's great to have some of the team here representing, and then some bean champions. And so it's a group, and you can look and see exactly who's involved on our website. And then there's many people that are involved in the coalition, and I'm hoping everyone would join the coalition in some sort of way. And so there is ways to continue to get engaged. In terms of getting engaged, join the coalition. We're also, if you want to contact me or one of our team, you can sign up and then be a part of this conversation and see what you can contribute and how you can inspire others, but also connect in. We then are encouraging people to spread bean inspiration. And so as we all talked about, we have phones in our hands, we have networks. How do we get the message out? We're doing quite a bit of work around getting beans on the menu, and I'll talk a little bit about that later today, but a number of different pilots about how do we get beans on menus around so that almost every menu in the world should have beans. We went for dinner last night and we asked about beans and they pulled out one dish. It should be more options than that. You know, we need to be getting to that point. And then thinking about how you can use beans in your events. So that just gives you a little snapshot. I'll go into a little bit more in a second, but I'm going to hand over now to Alison. And Alison, you can introduce yourself.
Great, thank you. Okay. So first of all, thank you for the invite to be here. It's incredible to be part of this community once again. I was in Colombia last year and I was so excited, and a year has gone by so quickly, and it's just already an incredible meeting. So my name's Alison Greenhalgh-Ball. No one can ever pronounce my name. Even Paul, who I've known for years, still gets it wrong.
I try, but...
So I'm known as AGB for a reason. And, you know, the purpose here is to introduce yourselves. So I'm British. I find that quite squirmy, quite uncomfortable, so bear with me. I'll probably go a bit red. So who am I and what have I done? What's my background? So my background is very much kind of health and the relationship between food and health. So I started off in academia, so looking at nutrition epidemiology, the relationship between food and cancer, and diabetes, hypertension, lots of things like that. I then made a bit of a switch and I went into the food industry, and I became a global lead within the food industry. A global exec looking at kind of innovation, renovation, policy, etc. I then jumped again, and now I kind of work across sectors, and more to that in a second. But actually I had an epiphany about 15 years ago, in the fact that I couldn't think of health in isolation. I had to think of health in terms of kind of climate and nature and equity. And I had to think in systems. Because if I thought in silos, then we're not going to move the needle, and we're not going to address some of the kind of horrendous health and climate challenges that we're facing and still facing. So that epiphany, thankfully, is now known as kind of food systems thinking. And I'd say I've been doing that for many years. And I work across lots of different sectors. I work with small foods, I work with big foods, I work with multinationals, I work with investors, and I obviously work with Paul. And I've worked with Paul for many years because he's a systems thinker and he drives that system so well and beautifully, so everyone can see their relative role within that system. And just a couple of examples of, just to illustrate some of the work I do is, I was obviously delighted to partner with Paul and Chelsea and the team to put together the theory of change of how we're going to double consumption of beans globally. That sounds really easy, doesn't it? We know how difficult that is. But so proud of this work, and it really will serve as a bit of a vision, a bit of a path forward for us all to kind of really think about how we're going to curate that route to doubling consumption. Another example is a kind of a guide for CEOs for business on what their responsibility is for health and how we can understand and unlock that within a business setting, and that was launched at Harvard last year. So a couple of examples of what I do. But as I said, I'm particularly interested in food systems thinking. So lots of people talk to the what, why you need to do that, very rational. And we've heard from Eve, actually, we need to think about the why. So food touches every aspect of all our lives each and every day. And I firmly believe that together we can really kind of build resilient food systems. And why I'm so excited about beans, you know, beans seem to kind of infiltrate everything I do at the moment. Everyone thinks I just work 100% on beans. I think I do, because I really see beans as being so unique. Everyone can understand their role within beans. People are quite selfish. They say, what's in it for me? So what's in it for me? If you're a farmer, if you're a buyer, if you're a producer, you're a manufacturer, you're a policymaker, you're a chef, you're a home cook, everyone can understand their role within beans. That's really unique. I cannot think of another food that does that. And so by harvesting that uniqueness, I really feel confident that we can transform our food systems.
Thank you. Kathy.
Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conference and part of this distinguished panel. I, by and large, want to, the wrong green one. Thank you. By and large, I don't think we are creating bean lovers. If we are to double the consumption of beans in the next 5 years, then we must look at the youngest consumers, because that's where our habits begin. That's where we begin to form dietary habits. And we do that, by and large, through the foods that we're serving our students, our children, through childcare programs and through school programs. Early in my career, I taught at the Culinary Institute of America. And while I was there, I had somewhat of an epiphany in that I was curious as to why at the Culinary Institute of America, using the same basic ingredients that are being used around the world, why the food is so delicious. Why in a popular restaurant, a bean dish can be so delicious, but using those same beans in a school or another institutional setting, they're not inspiring. So after I left the CIA, much of my work has been focused on doing just that, helping schools create delicious meals. And I do that in a couple of different avenues. I do that as chair of the CIA's Healthy Kids Collaborative, a group that's focused on building a culinary culture in school nutrition. And I do that as director of Healthy School Recipes, a completely free resource for anyone to use that has thousands of recipes for school nutrition and culinary resources to train school nutrition professionals in how to improve the quality of their meals. And why do I think that school meals is such an important part of developing and creating bean lovers? Well, first of all, in the United States, we're serving 30 million lunches to students each day. We're serving over 15 million breakfasts each day. Around the world, regardless of the size of your community, often the school cafeteria is the largest food service operation. And this is where we need to begin to serve inspiring, delicious bean dishes. Second is school meals are the healthiest meals that we're serving. Study that came out in 2021 in JAMA Online, trends in food sources and diet quality among US children and adults showed that school meals, in fact, were the healthiest of all meals served across the board, whether it's from grocery stores, quick service restaurants, fine dining. School meals are, in fact, the healthiest. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about policy. And policy certainly is important. One of the reasons why school meals are the healthiest in the United States is that policy dictates that. For those of you unfamiliar with policy and nutrition standards in school meals in the United States, vegetables have to be served each day. It's one of the 5 meal components. And beans are one of those vegetable subgroups that has to be served each week. However, policy does not necessarily create bean lovers. We have a policy to serve more vegetables because we know that up to 25% of children don't eat a vegetable each day. We know that policy is important, but policy isn't driving consumption always. What will drive consumption with our students, with our children, is that if we pay attention to the bean dishes that we're serving. We cannot just open a can of beans and serve it to a student and expect to create a bean lover. We have to think about how we take that culinary application and apply it to the students that we're serving.
Thank you, Kathy. Over to you, Javier.
So thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this extraordinary panel. I am learning a lot. Actually, I am food chemist, specialized in food science and technology, and I have been working with the dairy industry for many years. And then I have joined different ingredients companies in technical sales positions until 2020, that I have joined Bridge to Food. If I want to explain what is Bridge to Food, it would be a little bit complicated, or it could be very short. Just look at the name. Bridge to Food is a company that tries to put in contact, to build bridges between professionals and institutions, organizations, all along the value chain. So what we try to do is to organize events like conferences, courses, summits, and webinars in which we put together ingredient manufacturers, raw material suppliers, food companies, food equipment companies, universities, research centers, and so on. So this is what we try to do, and we are focused on plant-based foods and alternative proteins. This is the purpose of Bridge to Food. We have three different activities. One is the events that we organize, like I've said. The second one is a permanent platform that we call the Global Plant-Based Foods and Proteins Ecosystem, that we have meetings every other Tuesday to discuss topics that could be technical or marketing or presentations on innovations and so on. And the third one is participation in European research projects. We do not conduct research, but we are in contact with universities and research centers. And what we do in this, participating in these communities, is to collaborate on the communication and dissemination of the results, organize workshops, and so on. This is one example. This was the Summit Europe last year in The Hague, the Netherlands. Our company is based in the Netherlands. And the ecosystem, as I've said, is a permanent platform. We have meetings organized for Europe and Asia Pacific in the morning, and meetings for Europe and the Americas in the afternoon. And then we discuss, it's about 1 hour and a half, and we have 3 or 4 speakers and panel presentations. And this is the way that we share information and news about the plant-based and alternative proteins. So in this case, I was wondering how I can contribute to this discussion, and I wanted to address the context, and this has 3 factors: the market, the investment, and the technical situation. So in the ecosystem, one of the first activities that we've had when we launched the ecosystem in 2019 was to define some of the main challenges for the whole value chain. One was product quality, second, nutritional value of alternative proteins, third, product conformity and standardization, valorization of the food pools. So this is something that is very interesting and has to do with this conference. Life cycle analysis development, and value chain connectivity. And these 6 challenges is something that we have been trying to introduce in our program of activities when we organize the program for the summits, the courses, and also for the ecosystem. This is just an example. I wanted to show that there are things going on, very interesting things going on. There is increasing interest in the universities for plant-based foods and alternative proteins. And I would say, I was thinking when I was listening to you, that probably beans are the Cinderella of these plant-based foods. We are always considering, I don't know, precision fermentation, genetically modified foods, cell-grown meat, all of these sexy alternatives, and sometimes we are not looking around that we have certainly some sources that have not been exploited, fully exploited. And this is something we have to face. We need to invest in research, we need to invest in marketing and create awareness of the consumers about the benefits of these foods.
Perfect. Thank you, Javier, Kathy, and Alison. It's great to have you on stage together to look at this topic. So we're going to dive into the conversation. I just want to put a little bit of a frame just around the conversation. So Alison mentioned the theory of change that was developed for doubling bean consumption that Chelsea and Alison were helping lead with many others inputting. And part of thinking about this, it was released last September, and it was really looking at how do we go about doing this? And so in thinking about that, we had to think about how do you shift behavior, the trends, to move the system forward. And that means getting a lot of stakeholders involved. It means thinking about how we look at communications and marketing, how do we coordinate advocacy, how do we think about research to drive that kind of behavior change forward. And so a lot of that work you can have a look at in the theory of change. It's available as a PDF to download. It's about 30 pages, so it's a little bit of a read, but it's not...
Great read, though.
It's a great read. And I encourage you to read the full, not the summary. But in that, we kind of have developed a bit of a frame, and it's built around 2 impact pathways as a framework. We understand that globally, you can't do the same thing everywhere and expect the same result. You have to contextualize, you have to think about local scenarios, you have to think about local culture. And so for us, what we've done is set up a guiding framework that sets out 2 impact pathways that we can tailor to different target audiences and locations that we're looking at. And these are about, and this is what we're going to frame the conversation around now, is looking at demand creation. So how do we move beans from being a should to a want in an effort to change this perception globally? How do we raise awareness in the right way? How do we get trusted voices involved? How do we move this forward? And we'll talk more on that. And then at the same time, how do you create that enabling environment? And that's looking at the policies, the advocacy work that's going on. And this is very much, there's great work going on in the US around dietary guidelines. There's work in Australia, I know, on that, in Germany, that helps set the goal. But as you've mentioned already, Kathy, that's fine, but it's also got to taste good. It's also got to, people have got to want to eat it. And so thinking through that. So we'll talk more on this. And then we're just looking at a model to scale. And so in this campaign, it's 5 years. So last year was really building the foundation. Now we're kind of moving and learning to adapt. There's different priority countries, but we're working also in many others. Lots of different ideas on the go, and we'll talk more about them. And tomorrow, we're actually having a stakeholder meeting in the afternoon. For anyone who wants to learn more about the Beans is How campaign, I encourage you to come along. We can take you through more of the practicalities of what we're thinking about and how you could be involved, but we'll dive into that. So if this is a big campaign that we need to move forward, I want to start our conversation by going into how do we incentivize demand. We've talked about consumer awareness, we've talked about influencing innovation and food choice, behavior change communication, champion and influencer collaboration. So comments, thoughts, who wants to jump in first?
I'm happy to jump in first. I think before I kind of dive into creating demand, I think I'd like to recognise we almost had a bit of a fisty fight, didn't we, about this? So Paul was saying it's all about creating demand, and I think Chelsea and I were saying, yeah, but it's the right environment as well, and that missing middle. So the whole system's got to come together. So creating demand is really, really, really critical, but without that enabling environment and without that missing middle, so without the the processing,
Yep.
the kind of packaging, the canning. We have all this demand, but yet actually we can't fulfill that demand. So I just wanted to recognize that. But creating demand requires a lot of actors, doesn't it? It requires, I'm really passionate about the role of chefs. I first met Paul actually in Stockholm in Sweden when he launched the Chef's Manifesto. And that was another epiphany moment, like, oh gosh, they're going to translate all this technical, really difficult kind of language and requirements and asks into the language of food. And that has been quite transformational. So chefs, how do they kind of take beans and put that on the menu and create amazing, delicious foods that people are really wanting to have and desire and continue to eat either in a restaurant setting, but actually importantly at home as well. So chefs is one example. We also have the role of big and small food. So we have big food manufacturers who, I think majority of the global supply of food is a handful of organizations that supply that. And the power that they can leverage in order to kind of put beans within their innovation and products is incredible. So the role of big food, do not underestimate. And small food, so those kind of amazing brands that are coming through that are really speaking to, what Eve was talking to, those disruptor brands that are presenting beans in a very different way to encourage that reappraisal and excitement and desirability. So big and small foods is really kind of key. But then, of course, we've got the school setting, we've got the workplace setting. So all of this working together helps create that kind of desire and demand, I would say. And retailers too, let's not forget the retailers. Really important cog in the wheel here.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I also want to add with the impact in serving children, it's not a one and done with kids. As you're introducing new foods, it can take up to 10 times exposure for a child to want to even try something. When you're in a home situation or a restaurant situation, you often don't get those 10 times. A parent isn't going to want to serve a bean 10 times before their child says, oh, maybe I will try it now. It just is hard to break through that wall often. But in schools, there's opportunity to introduce over and over again so that you begin to build that bean lover. The second piece that I think is very exciting is we're seeing in school nutrition that culinary culture, that chef influence trickling down. And it has to move down for us to begin to develop those bean lovers at an earlier age, because our youngest consumers are like us. They love delicious food, and they want delicious food. And we have to begin to build that with the younger consumer. And then third, it's not just the children. It's their parents that we have to break through to. It's the menu planners and the cooks in schools that we have to influence so that they see the role that they play in influencing children's eating habits.
Yeah, so I agree, and I think when it comes to study what is driving the consumption of different foods, we can think about a lot of different things and say sustainability, health, and whatever, but when you go to the answers, when you make a poll and you go to the answers, the first reason is texture and flavor. It's the sensory experience. If the people, you can explain that this is 10 times less, has 10 times less impact than meat or something like that, but if the consumers don't like it, they will not repeat. They could try it, but they will not repeat. So texture and flavor is the first factor, and by far is the main reason for the choice in the case of mainstream consumers. The second one is price. You must be competitive. I have been seeing, we are working in Bridge to Food with many researchers, startups, and so on that are developing these wonderful alternative proteins. But if you put something that looks like meat, smells like meat, tastes like meat, but is 5 times more expensive than meat, the people will not buy it. There is no reason. You can see people that make a choice because they are vegans, but if they are vegans, why the hell they would like to have something that tastes like meat? So this is something, a very strong contradiction. And the companies have invested zillions of dollars trying to develop something that is like a burger. Burger is a commodity product. So if you want to make something that is different, don't make a burger, please. There are too many already in the market. And we don't have to create this expectation. I don't know how many of you have heard about the Gartner hype cycle. If not, I will ask you to make an exercise of imagination. They say this curve is the curve of expectations against time. And the form of the curve is like this. There is a very high expectation, and this is a peak of hype when you think that, for example, precision fermentation will solve all the problems that we have in the food system. Then there is a very strong disillusionment when this not comes, and then there is a more reasonable growth until we reach a plateau. And I think we are right now, we have gone from the peak of excitement or hype, and we are going to this trough of disillusionment, and we need to develop new things, new alternatives that satisfy the consumer needs.
I want to echo what you say, Javier, that the sensory components are so important, the taste, the flavor. And beans really are an ideal vegetable with children. Some of the other vegetables, the dark green, the cruciferous vegetables, will bring more bitter flavor profiles. And that is a flavor profile that children are last to like. They are looking for those non-bitter. And beans are perfect for that because they're just a beautiful palette to add so many other flavors. So there's really no reason why children can't love beans.
No, I love what you guys have shared. I mean, there's so many different elements here. I think often we forget that people make decisions based on cost, taste, and convenience on the whole.
Holy Trinity.
Pardon?
The Trinity.
Yeah, it's cost, convenience, and taste, and you've got to get at least 2 of them to even get it on the plate, you know, in front of somebody. Ideally, you want 3, and it's those practical things, and it's very different, but it's not necessarily the cheapest. It's sometimes more expensive, you know, as Eve was talking about. Sometimes we'll buy a cheese because of all the other stuff going on, but you know, it's understanding some of those nuances. So very, very key for us thinking about how we incentivize demand. We're going to now take a few minutes each just to talk a little bit about the enabling environment. And Alison, you know, referenced that conflict because for me, I was like, let's drive forward and just push demand, you know, and demand, everything else will follow. You know, we'll get everything lined up. And she said, well, how are you going to meet that demand? And we started all these conversations, and it was like, we've got to scale up. You've got to be able to get the beans. You've got to be able to do it. And I'm like, okay. So we need to think about this environment. And so there's different areas that have been mentioned in conversation already: school meals, dietary guidelines, support for farmers and agriculture, public procurement. What are some thoughts? I'm conscious of the clock because I want to get to questions from the audience, but a couple of thoughts from each of you on this area of incentivizing the enabling environment.
Want me to start?
I don't mind.
Yeah. So you and I spend a lot of time trotting around the globe, don't we? And understanding that global environment, that global policy environment. And I'm so heartened by the recent kind of meeting in COP. Did anyone follow COP?
Was there?
Whoa. Well, anyway, it was really good news in the fact that food systems was finally recognized to be a critical kind of factor in addressing climate change. Why is that important? Well, that's important because over 150 countries signed the declaration, and that means that those countries are going to start kind of really working on their food system policies. And why is that important for beans? Because beans are a kind of critical part of the solution for them. So we'll start to see a real trickle down through kind of those negotiations at COP. So some examples include already that we're seeing, but these will be kind of further amplified. So in Korea, we're seeing regulations on alternative proteins. Have you seen that? Kind of over the last month, that's been announced. Beans are an amazing alternative protein. So that's one example of a policy that could be really the pull for beans. In Holland, your government is committed to double consumption of beans, which is absolutely incredible. And again, lots of governments copy each other. There's policy bundles that get shipped around, and we're really hopeful that that's going to be replicated with other countries. And certainly in my own home country, in the UK, Paul and I are involved with Oxford University. There's a project that's run by the government trying to get to net zero for carbon. But as part of that, they're using beans as the vehicle. And what's amazing is they've curated this community of farmers and academics and manufacturers and kind of brands, big and small brands. And importantly, it's in a school setting. One of their kind of critical projects is in a school. And so these kids are taken out to the field, they're shown how beans are made and grown, and they touch and feel and taste. And there's a real appraisal of beans within the school kind of environment. And so start to kind of change the dietary guidelines, start to have that kind of environment in schools, and we're really having that enabled environment that we so desperately need to see. So all these need to kind of be layered up. The global kind of situation is really important for us. That starts to kind of have action in kind of countries around the world. But that grassroots and local is really important too.
While that's critical, and I love when students get out in the field, I love when we have school gardens, those are all positive changes that will make a difference. But we also have to look at the barriers from the other side. What are the barriers that are keeping beans from being on every school plate? There's all sorts of barriers. We don't have necessarily a skilled food service professionals in the school kitchen. Unlike restaurants, even quick service restaurants, unlike other food service operations, school nutrition professionals aren't, on a whole, culinarily trained. Yep. So we lack the skill to create those delicious beans. So one, we have to focus on providing those culinary skills, but also other ways around that. You can provide those culinary skills in the products that you bring to the market. You can create those products that are ready to serve, that will enable a school to serve more easily, more readily, great bean products. There's barriers with equipment in schools. Often schools don't have the equipment to cook. Again, by you bringing those products that are ready to serve, that are delicious to the students, that can help break down some of those challenging barriers.
I have nothing to add on top. It's extremely clear. I think we should invest on research and development that has to do with the sensory aspects and also with the nutrition aspects. This is critical, absolutely critical. We need to make the private sector, but also the public sector to invest in this research. And we also have to invest on creating awareness. And I think we cannot oblige the consumers to buy this. We have to create this feeling, we have to create this awareness for the people to choose what we are promoting. And I think this is extremely critical because one of the things we have assumed after many meetings with people from different areas of the value chain, is that it is absolutely critical that we change the food system as it is. It's not sustainable, and I'm not telling you that you have to be good people and choose a different alternative because we love the earth and we want to save the planet and so on. It's just a matter of survival. We don't have enough protein to feed all the people in the world in the next 30 years. I have read an article that was published in The Guardian from UK on January 29th. Very, very interesting. I really recommend it. And it says that recent research project has established that if we change the food system, we could save about $10 trillion in money.
Yeah.
Because of the side effects that our current food system is having in the planet, in the health, we will have about an increase of 70% of obesity in the developing countries.
Yeah.
And we will have also 640 million people underweight. So we need to change this. This is not an option. We have no alternative. And if we can contribute conducting research on this area, on the development of new foods and creating new alternatives on beans, I think we will make a great advance on this.
May I kind of come in? So that was the Food Systems Economic Commission report that was launched on Monday of this week.
Berlin, yeah.
I really recommend that you take a look at it. It's taken 4 years to put that together. But what they've illustrated is the true cost, the burden to kind of health and the planet on food. And you're right, so 10 trillion is the kind of true cost. It's unbelievable. But what's really important is that report cites beans as part of the solution to move forward. It's really, really clear. I looked at it again, last night. There's 5 sightings where beans is part of that solution house. So go and take a look at that report. It's really, really critical.
One of the key leaders in that is Gunhild Stordalen, who's also on the Bean Science Advisory Committee. There is a lot of reports we've mentioned, and I do think they are worth looking at because I do think in this policy space, there's a lot starting to converge. Yeah. I mean, even at COP, the World Food Programme, the United Nations World Food Programmes, is leading a group called the School Meals Coalition, which is a coalition that's established out of the UN Food Summit to increase school meals around the world. They launched a report connecting school meals and climate impacts. And they looked at everything from how you're cooking right through to what you're serving. And beans are front and center in this. Now, this is something for then countries to think about in terms of how they're meeting their commitments around environment and then health and everything. And so there's these kind of reports are quite interesting to think about depending on the market you're in as levers for conversations with policymakers to be able to help connect dots. And what we're seeing is just almost an avalanche of reports and studies all pointing there. And often what you find is that beans and pulses are right in the middle of all of that. And so it's an opportunity for us to double down on the messages that we're already having. So it's a great way to move forward. But I want to open up...
It's no coincidence, though, that beans are cited, because so many of those people who are putting together those reports are part of this community who understand that beans are the critical unlock.
Yeah.
It's starting to work.
It's starting to work. I've got a few minutes for any questions. Does anyone want to ask a question to the panel? We've probably got time for a couple of questions. So do I see, we'll bring a mic over to you. And I'll probably take 2 questions. So if we've got another hand, and then we'll have a go at answering them. So the microphone's coming round. Have we got another question as well? Got one just up here at the front.
Gracias. Qué interesante es la plática que hemos tenido con ustedes. Hemos aprendido muchísimo. Muy interesante. No quiero hacer una pregunta, quiero hacer varios comentarios acerca del frijol. México ha aportado al mundo productos tan bonitos como la vainilla, el tomate, el maíz, el aguacate, hasta el chocolate y hasta el frijol es mexicano. Hay que recordarlo. El frijol es de origen mexicano. Todos sabemos que el frijol es muy sabroso, es una fuente de proteínas, es una fuente de fibras que previene el cáncer de colon, que ayuda a prevenir ciertos desórdenes cardiovasculares, que no tiene colesterol porque es un vegetal, que enriquece la tierra porque tiene unos rizosomas que nitrogenan la tierra, que requiere poca agua y en este momento en que el mundo vive un cambio climático en donde las sequías es el común denominador, el frijol y las leguminosas en general son una excelente solución. Pero con todo y esto que he mencionado, hemos visto con mucha tristeza que en México ha bajado drásticamente el consumo de frijol. En 30 años ha bajado el frijol de 16 kilos per cápita a aproximadamente 7 kilos per cápita. Nos da mucho gusto ver que en Estados Unidos está subiendo el consumo de frijol. Desde que empezamos a comprar frijol en Estados Unidos consumía 1 millón de bultos de frijol negro. Hoy consume aproximadamente 5 millones de bultos de 100 libras de frijol negro y aproximadamente 9 millones de bultos de frijol pinto. Y tenemos un país que consume mucho más frijol que todo el mundo y es el principal productor de frijol en el mundo, que es Brasil, que produce 3,5 millones de toneladas y consume 3,5 millones de toneladas. O sea que el consumo de Brasil es de 16 kilos per cápita. El de Estados Unidos aproximadamente es de 3 kilos per cápita y México 7. ¿Y qué es lo que ha pasado? ¿Por qué ha bajado el consumo en México? Pues una de las razones es que la población rural ha emigrado a la ciudad. Y la población que vive en la ciudad vive a tal velocidad que no hace frijoles. Ha ayudado mucho la conversión del consumo de frijol en México al frijol enlatado, que ha subido mucho el consumo, y también un frijol en bolsa que se llama pouch. Pero a pesar de eso, hemos bajado, lo repito, de 16 kilos per cápita a 7 kilos per cápita. Nos han estado ganando también algunas sopas de fideos asiáticas y muchas comidas como papitas, etcétera, que son un sustituto de los frijoles, pero que no tienen proteínas. Es una comida que no sirve. Yo creo que habría muchas medidas de políticas públicas para poder hacer que la población regrese a los niveles de consumo que teníamos anteriormente, porque es una fuente de proteínas enriquecedor, bastante valioso, porque es barato, porque es sabroso y porque es mexicano. Gracias.
So, Javier, do you want to represent the panel, maybe just to comment that really quickly? Or we just leave it there as a statement?
Yes. May I respond in Spanish?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Creo que uno de los factores es el tema de lo que estábamos hablando. Las políticas públicas tienen influencia, pero no son en última instancia determinantes. Hay que ofrecerle a los consumidores opciones que sean atractivas. Y un poco lo que estaban diciendo, a mí los frijoles, las alubias, los guisantes, todo eso me encanta, pero debo confesar que yo en casa no los cocino porque tengo la idea de que da mucho trabajo. Entonces, ofrecer alternativas que sean de conveniencia para consumir puede ser un factor importante para incrementar el consumo. Y lo otro, sí, que tiene que ver con las políticas públicas, aparte de facilitar la producción y la investigación y desarrollo en esta área, creo que es también el hacer campañas de concienciamiento, campañas de difusión para que la gente que no está enterada realmente empiece a consumir estos productos. Entonces, yo creo que va un poco por ahí. Y creo que la experiencia de Brasil es un factor cultural. Lo que tú estabas mencionando es un factor cultural. Ellos siempre han tenido black beans, el poroto negro o alubia negra y arroz blanco en todos los menús. Uno puede ir a una steakhouse, siempre va a tener eso. Y es un factor cultural. O sea, en última instancia, el fenómeno de la comida o la gastronomía es un factor cultural.
Gracias, Javier. So we have one opportunity for one more question, Paul.
Yep.
So if you have that question, raise your hand. Si tienen alguna pregunta más, por favor, levanten la mano.
Here, can you hear me? Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, this is Dr. Juan. This question is for Kathy, and it's regarding meals in schools. You talked about beans, being a vegetable, and therefore being part of counts as part of what's required for schools. Does that include processed beans, or is it whole beans?
Great question. First, I need to add to that. Beans are really amazing in school meals because they credit towards the vegetable, and that's important, but they also can credit towards the meat also. Beans are going to play a much more important role in school meals as that meat alternate. So beans are the only food that really credit in both of those groups. So great opportunity there. No, whole beans certainly credit, but bean products as well. There's a lot of work being done with bean flours, a lot of work being done with other bean products that are finding their way into school nutrition.
Well, thank you. I think we've come to time, but I would just like to encourage everyone to reach out to the panel, come and talk to us. I think one of the big things that if we're going to actually increase consumption that is absolutely critical, and maybe we haven't highlighted as highly as we should, is that we actually need to coordinate. We need to coordinate together over a number of years. It doesn't happen instantly. But I think what US Dry Beans are doing in bringing together this BeanCon over the last few years, the conversations, the partners that are stepping in to support these kinds of gatherings, this is part of an ongoing movement, and it's a part of getting conversations going about collaboration. And I think this is what BeanCon's about. It's about us coming together. It's about us working out those plans, those ways, those alliances to actually step into this in a systematic way. And I think if we do that, we can then see the doubling of consumption. I think the only thing holding us back in doing that is not working together. And so I just want to end on that point, thanking our panelists, Alison, Kathy, and Javier for joining us and being with us. And thanks once again to BeanCon for having us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to the panelists. So while the panelists exit the stage, thank you very much. It was a great conversation. We're going to take a quick look at this video, please. Again, thank you to our sponsors. And before we continue with the program, we're going to take a 5-minute break to stretch our legs, refill our coffees, and then we want to invite you to come back to experience the Beans Make Our Planet Better. So please make sure it's only 5 minutes. Thank you.